Daniel is standing before the most powerful king on earth, and he has to tell him, this dream is about you. But Daniel does not celebrate Nebuchadnezzar's fall. He does not use the truth like a weapon, and he is troubled because judgment is coming. And that raises a hard question for us today. Can we speak truth without pride? Can we warn people without enjoying their fall? And in Daniel chapter 4, the dream gets personal, the king's pride gets exposed, and Daniel shows us how to speak the hard truth without a hard heart. And that's what we'll discover today.
Two faithful brews and the good news, join the ride with open hearts. Together we'll discover God's word and where it starts. Dive into the pages, lessons old and new. Every sip of wisdom brings light to the view.
Welcome back to Two Faithful Brews and the Good News. I am Paul Purifoy, and I'm sitting here with Uncle Royce, and we have been in Daniel chapter 4, and we're going to continue in this chapter. And in the last episode, we looked at verse 15 through 18. The tree was cut down, but the stump was left. And the king's heart would be changed from a man's heart to a beast's heart. And 7 times would pass over him. And the whole purpose, it was very clear, that the living may know what the Most High rules in the kingdom of men. And in this episode, we're going to move into Daniel's response and his interpretation here. And this is where the dream really becomes more direct, because the tree is not just a tree, and the cutting of that tree is not just some kind of imagery. The beastly condition that is around is not just the symbolism, but Daniel is about to tell Nebuchadnezzar that the dream is about him. And that is why this passage is so powerful. Daniel is not standing before any ordinary man. He was a king, right? He's the king of Babylon. And this same king who had authority, who had power, he had the armies, the wealth, all kinds of influence. That same king who had thrown Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into a fiery furnace. This is not a man that you can casually correct. But, I always like that word sometimes, Uncle Royce, but Daniel, he belongs to the God who rules over kings. So today we're going to be looking into Daniel chapter 4, verses 19, and we'll see Daniel's burden. And before we get into verse 19, Uncle Royce, do you have any thoughts, questions?
Well, yeah, I do. I have a thought or two. We've been in yesterday, we've been in today, and we're going to be moving into tomorrow, which is where Nebuchadnezzar is actually at, but he's talking about yesterday, but this conversation's taking place today. So we've got 3 time sequences, 3 dispensations, and we have every kind of relationship in the world in them. Nebuchadnezzar, sitting where he is, finally turned to the place that I feel like he's recognized and understood. This is where God has been with Daniel all this time. And he's carried us into a place of failure. He's carried us into a place of relationship, everyday living. And he's carried us into a place of where the lives that we live from day to day bring circumstances. And what we do with those circumstances often contributes and has very strong motivation that works within our character, within who we are. Nebuchadnezzar, where he's at, is letting us see, I think, looking at this one, turning to Daniel, is the fact that he's recognizing that there is a God, one God, that is an authority and a power above and beyond anything that this world has to offer. He's understanding that as much as he has and all that he's done, and with all the pride that he has in himself, it all has to take a back seat. And he has to get off the throne and recognize and understand that as much as I think I know, as much as I think I do, I still have to recognize that I am not in control. So when he talks about it and it says, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you, he is making a recognition to Daniel that says, Daniel, you have a relationship with a God that I have never known or understood. I can see where his heart and his mind is at, but he's also saying to him that I don't have any doubts now that what you're about to tell me is going to be a truth. And before we move into these scriptures, I'd just like you to put a quick thought. When it comes to truth and what Nebuchadnezzar's doing with Daniel here, it's moved into a relationship with him. How do you, and this is just an opinion and a physical personal opinion of Nebuchadnezzar, when it comes to Daniel, the relationship that the two of them have, Nebuchadnezzar is speaking of when he turns to Daniel and says, Daniel, I'm placing this in your hands. What is that relationship that's moved him to that place?
There's a trust that Nebuchadnezzar has now toward Daniel, but just because he trusts what he's saying doesn't mean that he is, as we've seen so far through chapter 4, that he hasn't been willing to place Daniel to the top of the list. He still wants to hold on to his religion, his tradition, his power that he's got. He still wants to rely on everything that Babylon has to offer before he moves to the outside, so to say, for the real truth. Nebuchadnezzar, he enjoys the culture that he's in. He enjoys the fact that everything they've ever done has always worked and it's brought him the success that he's got. But now he's not getting the answers that he's really wanting. So he has a trust in Daniel because of what Daniel's already done in the previous chapters. But yet he didn't want to give it over to Daniel and have to allow Daniel to become the one that would be able to give this interpretation, because if that's the case, then he knows that Daniel's God is really in more control than Nebuchadnezzar wants to admit. So that kind of gives you the relationship aspect that you were talking about there.
Okay. Yeah. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I like to tie this into our lives today, to individuals, those that might see and hear this. And I can't help but thinking about the friendship. Regardless of there's a friendship here, and I think that shows through. There's a trust. There's I think there's a truth there, that truth can be what it is, and truth is going to be what it is, but sometimes we affect it. And I think Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar's in a place to where Nebuchadnezzar is leaning as life in our lives today, in the church or in our personal lives. We've got family, we've got friends, we've got family members. That's why I want to bring this out, because what we're seeing is a relationship that's taking place between Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel here, in a point and a choice and things that are being made. There's a recognition, Paul, that life is taking place. Nebuchadnezzar knows it, he understands it. Daniel knows it and he understands it. But over the years, and I forget how many years we've got here, but it's been quite a while since the way back in chapter 1 and 2 and where we're at now. And Nebuchadnezzar, that relationship has grown. And we've seen some of these things happen. But now when Nebuchadnezzar does this and starts turning it over to Daniel, we're fixing to see another side of this relationship. And I want you to input a little bit into this too. I'm going to read this 19th verse. Then I want you to read it with me and kind of share some of your thoughts on it. But it says that Daniel interprets the king's dream, so he's getting ready. But in that 19th verse, I want us to look at something here, because it said, then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spoke and said, Belteshazzar, don't let the dream or the interpretation trouble you. And so what we're seeing is a conversation, and I see concern and a recognition in Nebuchadnezzar. Evidently, the physical countenance of which Daniel is responding is talking a lot about where his heart and mind is and how the Spirit's moving within him. And even though he doesn't understand it, I do believe that Nebuchadnezzar feels this, recognizes it, and understands it, and knows that Daniel, this vision has caused him to have some thoughts that's very upsetting and troubling to him. And it's said that he's done this for an hour. We're talking about, in our time, 60 minutes. We're seeing this happen. That happens in our lives and families all the time. With Daniel and what's there, when Nebuchadnezzar makes these statements to him, and we're seeing Daniel there looking at this. I don't know the conversation in between, but at some point in time, we see Daniel's going to respond. But that relationship that's in the middle there, before we go to hit Daniel's responding and interpretations of this dream, we're looking and seeing that there is a place in this relationship where there has to be a coming together. And it looks to me like there's a comforting statement from Nebuchadnezzar towards Daniel when he sees that he's troubled. Do you see any of that in these scriptures as to where that relationship actually is there? And the feelings that they have is they're emotional for sure, but those feelings that are there, can you see those coming into play here between the two of them and what they're doing and what he's talking about here? And he's looking back, Nebuchadnezzar is. So he's also recognizing and remembering the emotions with which they were responding. So what would you say to that? And as we're looking at it today,
I don't think the relationship here is that big of a thing, because Nebuchadnezzar is still the king. It's the way he's reigning on his throne. He's doing exactly what he's going to do, regardless of whoever it was that's there. The only difference that you get is the fact that he knows what Daniel done before. So he knows in his mind what's there. But Daniel is doing exactly what Daniel had to do in order to adapt to the culture that he was now in. Daniel is the one, relationship is the key factor, because Daniel's relationship is the one that is with the Lord. And Daniel's relationship is the one that has been able to bring him from where he was through the fiery furnace, the things that were occurring to this point. So he's been able to have favor because of what God's done. And all that is allowed is the fact that now Nebuchadnezzar has this man that can come in, and he knows that he's going to get this interpretation, because this dream has bothered Nebuchadnezzar since he had it. That's why he called all these people in to start with. So he knows now that he's going to get the results of what the dream is. And I think that him knowing that he is about to receive those results, Uncle Royce, is what's really getting to him. He already knows the dream was kind of weird.
Yeah.
To start with. But now you see where Daniel is having to step into that role and say, you know what? It's okay. Because he says, and he answered and he said, my Lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. And as you said, Daniel hears the dream here, and the Bible says he was astonished for 1 hour. So it shows me that Nebuchadnezzar is not rushing Daniel for the full interpretation. And I'm sure Daniel, while he's in there, he's probably gave him just a little bit here and there along the way during that hour.
Okay.
And so what you get is that means Daniel himself, he was stunned at what he heard, because in that hour, he's hearing the dream from Nebuchadnezzar, from the king telling it. And then Daniel's like, okay, well, there's a little overwhelmingness here. So now Nebuchadnezzar's seeing Daniel's face, because I'm sure there was some kind of if you're astonished in something or stunned, you're going to have a look on your face,
no doubt. Yeah.
So he's seeing that, and then Daniel says he understood the meaning, and then it troubled him deeply. And that's important, because Daniel did not treat judgment casually.
Yeah. And looking at it from that point of view, I've heard you speaking of the fact and kind of looking at where you're at, and I don't like to move away from where we are today, anybody that hears this, because we have things like this happen in our lives all the time. And what we're seeing happen much is from the experiences of those relationships that those two have had together, what they're dealing with, and what's moving into their lives. And Daniel's speaking into this now, speaking from a fact that he has a recognition. He understands the character of Nebuchadnezzar, and he recognizes that this is a man that has authorities and powers that from the physical side can be devastating to himself if the king decides to use it and do it that way. And that may be where the astonishment is. The other side of it is, and I think this is something we do with our families a lot, Paul. When Daniel looks at Nebuchadnezzar, this is a man that he's built that relationship with, and what happens or doesn't happen matters. It makes a difference in the relationship and what will be there, and the choices and decisions that they're going to make. And from that point, he talks about it, and he just says, Daniel, my Lord, the dream, let this dream be to them that hate you. Let this dream be placed toward them, and let them see this. Let's not place this on your head, even though you are the stump. Let's recognize that there's outside circumstances that we will deal with here, that it's going, and we're the same way in our life today. We're looking at those same things today. That has to be some of the things that's troubling Daniel. that he's looking at with Nebuchadnezzar and considering what's there. And he's saying, but he said, and the interpretation thereof is to your enemies. Now, I want to think on that and let you say something on that little phrase, just that one little phrase. When you take it and kind of pull it away and see what Daniel's saying, Daniel is not only talking to Nebuchadnezzar, but he's looking at the surroundings he's in, the circumstances of the moment, the fact that what we're seeing happen, this is going to be futuristic in the application. We don't think sometimes when we make choices that those things are bringing application into our lives. We may not feel right at this moment, but let's give it a week or two or a month or a year, and then let's see these choices that we've made and these things that are there, how have they affected us in our lives, in our relationships, in the circumstances we have with our family, with our friends, on our jobs, because that's kind of where Daniel's at. And he's in a position that what he does and does not do very easily can have absolute effects and manner with which they're going to move not only in Nebuchadnezzar's life, not only in his own life, not only in his surrounding with his friends, but let's move it to a national level of the influence and authority where Nebuchadnezzar's at. What he's about to do and look at, he recognizes when he talks about this stunt with the watcher and the holy one being involved in it, that heaven's now involved. A lot of people don't believe in God anymore. They don't believe there's a God. They don't even believe that Jesus is who he is. They may have passing thoughts of him as a teacher or something like that. But what he's saying right here, the interpretation thereof, let it be to your enemies. And when you see that small phrase, does that matter today in our lives? As Daniel's looking at Nebuchadnezzar and saying, this is going to have an effect on what's taking place in our lives. How does he view that, and how does Nebuchadnezzar view it?
Well, Nebuchadnezzar's already had the fear. Again, that's why he's called all these people in for an interpretation, because something just didn't sit right with him. And that means when things don't sit right, there's usually some kind of a spiritual connection in there somewhere. So on Nebuchadnezzar's side, he's already had that, and he's called in. Nobody's interpreted this thing. There's no peace in it. Calls Daniel. Daniel's now seeing this. There's the astonishment that's here. He can see the concern that's in Daniel's face, the overwhelmingness. But Daniel tries to give the reassurance to some extent. Why? Because you're standing before the king. So you don't want to tell the king precisely, this is about you and this is what's going to happen. So this is where Daniel just kind of gives him I hate to say sales pitch, but he gives him the sales side of it. My Lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. He's kind of saying, let's hope this isn't for you, and this is for your enemies. Okay, I want you to think that. But again, Daniel doesn't treat judgment casually at all. And he did not hear the fall of Nebuchadnezzar and celebrate. And he did not say, good, he deserves it. That was not what Daniel's done. He did not use the interpretation as some kind of a weapon either, to show off that I'm looking for here, superiority, so to say, because Daniel actually had concern. He was troubled himself with what the interpretation that he's kind of seeing here. So that tells us something about the heart of a true messenger of God. And we need some people today to have that heart of a true messenger of God, Uncle Royce. And that's one of the things that we start missing, we really start missing, because we have a whole lot of voices, a whole lot of activity that's out there in the church world that gives so much. We have so much knowledge that's so accessible, but we're having a hard time finding true messengers of God that have that heart.
Yeah.
And a true messenger does not enjoy warning people of judgment. A true messenger carries the word, but they carry it with weight. And a true messenger, they can speak hard truths without having a hard heart toward people.
And that's to kind of input here just a little bit. That's kind of what we look at in our lives and our families, in the church and what's there today. There's a lot of people in the world today, they don't even want to think about what's coming, but what we're seeing, we're talking about a truth. And for them to tell a truth and to look at this the way Daniel's doing, he's recognizing that what I'm fixing to share with you is going to alter tomorrow. It is going to move into our lives, and the choices that are made are going to have an effect. Sometimes today, we have a tendency to want to cloud that truth. We don't want to really move into that. We want to kind of pretend or ease away from it and let it move into to where we're at and say, it's not going to be that bad. This is not going to be that bad. That's why I say sometimes Satan would beat us to death with love. He'll just destroy us. He'll destroy our families, whatever is there. And that's where Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, the other thing I give Nebuchadnezzar credit for here is the fact that he's looking at this and he is seeing in Daniel a truth that's coming out that he recognizes and understands. I'm fixing to have to make some decisions, and those decisions are going to affect me. They're going to affect what happens with those I have power and authority with. They're going to move into the lives around me. They're going to move into the region, the nation, wherever it might be. And we both know, according to this, where that tree and stump is growing, it's a major issue. It covers much, much territory. The power, the influence, the finances, everything that's involved, geographical, leaderships, his people that are there, those that he has these authorities with, these choices that he makes that's going to affect their lives, that's there. He knows that there's going to be decisions I've got to make, and those will be coming into play. They will physically be played out according to what I choose. My choices matter. So we have to go back to Nebuchadnezzar and seeing that. And Daniel understands it from the same place there. So when he says, Lord, let's let this be with your enemies, and the interpretation of it is there. And for those that hate you, let's point this in their direction and let them see what we're doing and what's there. And I think it says deeply to make the understanding to Nebuchadnezzar that while this is happening, those things that you do and say, they will affect what happens in our lives as we go forward. And looking at this now, and we look forward and him looking back, we know that the realities of what we're seeing and hearing are going to happen. It's not just a circumstance, but it is a happening. So when that dream comes out and he gives it to him while he's looking, he's understanding that Nebuchadnezzar's enemies, when this starts happening and it begins to take place, they're going to take advantage of it. When this happens and they get an opportunity, they will take advantage of what we're looking at here. Daniel understands it. Nebuchadnezzar even understands it, because also he's looking back. But now his pride in himself sometimes, I think, has deceived him into thinking that those choices I make will be good choices. They'll be right choices and everything's going to be okay. We do the same thing today, don't we? Don't we have those very same thoughts and attitudes about what we do and don't do? Or do we just say, Lord, I just hope everything's okay? Do we really place our faith in God? Or do we try to make decisions on what we believe to be correct and live with our beliefs rather than our faith? That's hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, most people live by their belief because we misinterpret, or we miss living by faith. And it's a hard thing to live by faith. Christian walk is not an easy walk, Uncle Royce, at all.
It's not.
It's not an easy path. It's not sunshine and rainbows. There's difficulties, there's challenges, and we all make the mistakes. My goodness. But we all have to keep a repentant heart, which is what Nebuchadnezzar didn't have. And it takes a man like Daniel who has both compassion in his heart, and he's willing to, because he has compassion, he's willing to tell truth without compromise. So, and it takes both of those things. And what we get to see is, even though he's troubled by the interpretation, he's still willing to speak what's coming. But we get to see where Nebuchadnezzar uses his belief and what he knows, and what he tells Daniel. He could see the distress that's in Daniel's face, and he tells him, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble thee. So that shows us that the king that knows that there's something that's serious that's going to come, but he's just going to hold into his belief that he believes in the power, he believes in the system.
Okay. So in other words, what you've got there and what you're looking at then with Nebuchadnezzar is he's saying, regardless of what comes out of this, Daniel, don't let it bother you, because whatever it is and however it is, I am well able to take care of it. I don't have to depend on something or somebody else. So don't you worry. You just tell me the truth of what's there and let me take care of the truth. Let me handle it. Now, when God says that has meaning. When Jesus says that has meaning. When man says that has problems. When Satan says that, it's a question of get ready, because we're caught up in situations. So what we're seeing then is with Daniel and with Nebuchadnezzar, we don't want to forget that what we're talking about here is that decree that was made. It is a decree, which means that it come from heaven. That watcher and that holy one that brought it is making that decree. And in verse 15, it talks about it. And 14, when it cries out and says, it talks about the stump. pulls it down, brings it to this place, and we've got it, and we recognize and understand that this decree that's about to come, it's a happening, Paul. When God tells us something's going to happen, it's kind of like redemption. When he says, I will bring deliverance to you, I will bring you salvation, I will bring redemption to you, but I'll do it through choice. I'll let you make the choices, and then they'll be applied according to how you make those decisions. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar's done. And when you get right down to it, you know what, Paul? Daniel's doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing. But what it's done, it has placed an opportunity into their lives at this time and moment with what they're dealing with. We have the same problem today. We have opportunities that come our way, and we make our choices and we decisions, believing it to be true, believing it to be the right thing, only to find out later on that it had unintended consequences that came with it. And we live with that today, Paul. And that's what we're kind of looking at here. So when we go forward and actually break into this decree that's there, is there anything that you see that we need to cover here before we start breaking that down and placing it in what it's going to be in the coming life in the next years that's coming with Nebuchadnezzar?
Well, we've went through kind of touch base a little bit on it, but Nebuchadnezzar brings it to bring in peace and calmness to Daniel. But then you get where Daniel knows that there's something serious here that's being given. And then Daniel says, my Lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. So in other words, that sales pitch I was talking about earlier, Daniel's saying, King, I wish this dream belonged to your enemies, and it doesn't belong to you. And he's not trying to flatter him. Daniel's actually, with what he's seen, there's a sorrow that's there. So Daniel has served in Babylon, but he's not bitter toward the things or with it. He'd been taken from his homeland. He had lived under the pagan empire. He had seen Babylon's system that was been set up. But yet when he stands before Nebuchadnezzar here, he doesn't speak with hatred. And that's a powerful lesson for a lot of people there. You may have been put in circumstances or in life situations that you weren't expecting or that you didn't want to be in. But regardless, you're there. And if you allow God to use you, he will help you overcome those things and help you have favor in those areas. So that's just a lesson that we can get out of that for us today. But you can oppose Babylon's pride all day long without hating it. The people that are there, they're trapped in Babylon. They're not going, they can't get out. And you can even stand against ungodly systems and still care about the soul of the person that's in front of you. That is where we have to come to a realization today as believers. We are standing in front of a system that is ungodly.
Yes.
I mean, there's not a godly bone in our system at this point. We just have a foundation that has allowed us we've been able to stand on. This is why it's so important to have a true foundation or a cornerstone, because it keeps the other things from really overtaking. Now, we can allow the cornerstone to be overtaken and destruction occur in our nation if we continue to allow certain demographics, certain political beliefs to come into power. But right now we have a foundation that we can stand on that can still trump everything. That's anyway.
Yeah, we still stomping the Trump today.
Yeah, we still need to do that. We still need to do that video, but anyway. I guess. But so you can stand before this ungodly system, and we could still care about people. We could still care about the souls of people, the love, the hearts of people. We could still want to reach them for the kingdom of God, share our testimony, share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so Daniel is not soft on the truth, but he is not cruel with the truth either. And that's the big thing. How do we tell people about Jesus? How do we do what we need to do in this culture? Not be soft on it, but also not be cruel with it.
Isn't that kind of what we talk about when I mentioned opportunity a while ago? When we look at that, we begin to look at what's taking place here, what takes place in our lives, what's taking place in our nation. We look at those people there, those that are in authority, those that aren't, even in our families, parents, children. The relational side of our daily living that we go through, choices that we make and everything that's there, they've been made available to us through Christ. You mentioned him a while ago. That is all made available to us, but it's also in choice, but that choice is based on a foundation. And I think that's kind of what we see Nebuchadnezzar doing with Daniel, and then Daniel in response is coming back and saying, those things that I'm about to say, those are things that's going to affect us tomorrow and going forward, and we're going to find that our futures will either be foundationally secure or they will be foundationally challenged, depending on the choices we make. And I like to say to Christians and stuff today, this does not mean that we're not Christians. This does not mean that we do not have Jesus Christ and the promises that were made to us in the church today. What it does mean is that those things that we choose and do, we build on that foundation, or we tend to build on that foundation those things that can be damaging. They can bring walls, they can build in our front. And this is what I think one of the things Daniel's looking at here. So when he gets ready to break this down and go forward and move forward into this and look into it and that relation that's there, he has a desire to do what's right. He has a desire to try and lead Nebuchadnezzar in a direction that's going to move him with his choices into things that will be beneficial. We get over a little bit further, we'll find out some of the recommendations he gives him verbally. But looking at this right now, we're seeing Nebuchadnezzar receiving from Daniel in this is the fact that Daniel is giving it, Nebuchadnezzar is receiving it, and in receiving of this, what he does about it is going to make a difference, because that's where I think the worry and concern is that Daniel had about it. But we also look at it, Paul, and we have to wonder about that concern that's there, because when you care about somebody, and I do think Nebuchadnezzar cared about Daniel. I think Daniel cares about Nebuchadnezzar, and I also think that deep down inside, we're looking and saying, what is tomorrow going to bring?
Yeah, well, you get to see here, Uncle Royce, you see that Daniel's troubled with this interpretation, and he's not eager to give this judgment. He's not eager to pronounce it. But it brings us to this place where we get to ask the question, what does that teach us about the spirit we should have when we have to speak hard truths to someone? Because the spirit carries a lot of weight here, the spiritual side of things. So there are a lot of people who want to be right, but they don't care if they are righteous in how they speak at all. And they want to win an argument, but they do not carry the burden of redemption in their life.
This is going to challenge you just a little right here. And I want to interject with it, because sometimes we see that happen every day in our families, in our nation, with our friends, in our churches, and it's all there. And when those are there and we're looking at them, we've got to look and we've got to wonder, what are the unintended consequences that's coming back at me? What is it that's fixing to bring into my life? I didn't choose it. I won't make the choices that are being made by others, but it is going to affect my life. And I want to make the very best choices that I can make now, because if I can do this in a proper way, if it can be applied in a way that's godly, you said it a while ago from the spiritual side, if we use that, that's why it's important for us to be on a foundation under Christ. That's why it's important for that spiritual foundation that we live in, and the truth of the Word of God and that 10 commandments that the character of God brings in. That is so real and it's so important. But today we're so dismissive of it. We miss that so much. So Daniel is sitting here looking at this, and he's saying to himself, I'm about to break this down. I am about to take this dream and break it down, and I'm going to make application with it. So when I make the application, let me make it in a way that is not judgmental. Let me make it in a way that is factual and truthful in the presentation, and let me do it properly, and let me speak this truth, but let it be with the understanding that what I'm giving you, you might not understand.
Yeah, I mean, the spirit portion of this that we always have to check with even ourselves, because I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a very blunt fella. I give my opinion, especially when it comes to family and everything. Sometimes I speak a little quicker before I've thought things through, and it's not a good habit, and it doesn't always come out of a good place sometimes. So we have to be careful with that, because again, there's a lot of people, we want to be right. So sometimes it doesn't come out of the right way of speaking in the righteous portion, and sometimes we just want to win the argument. But Daniel, he's not trying to win the debate we see here. He's not trying to do that at all. He's just wanting to be faithful to God, but he wants to be truthful. And a hard truth should not be delivered from a place of pride. And when
it should come from a point of judgment, though. I mean, sometimes we have to judge what we say and what we don't say and the manner with which we do it. So we're in a society today that, Lord have mercy, it's there. So what do we do with that?
Well, again, it depends on where you're coming from out of this. What spirit do we have in us? Are we doing things out of the spirit of pride? Because if pride is in us, then that we're going to have this, we're going to be right. We're not going to have a righteous way of doing it. We just want to win the argument, and we're going to do whatever it takes because there's no real carry of redemption. There's no real thing that's there. So we can just get in front of people. We can yell, scream, and spit on them, whatever it is, just because we want to be right, even though we may or may not be. So if you come out of it with the wrong spirit, then you're going to do it in the wrong way. And it's not necessarily about judgment. It's about what's in our hearts. And it should be delivered from a place of obedience and a place of burden.
And I've got a question to bring in there with that because we're looking at it caught up in today's society. I think you'll agree with me that it does not make any difference which way we go today. We can be 100% correct, but if we apply it in the wrong way, we have just brought a destruction to the truth. If we present the Lord, if we present the 10 Commandments, if we present Christ to the world in a way that may be truthful, but then we make an application in an adversarial way or a judgmental way, what is that going to do to the person that's hearing it? How does it work the intent of the heart of that individual? And what does it say about the intent of our hearts? And I'm going to have to stand here and I've got to be very cautious how I do this and say it. And the reason why is because I got a big mouth. I'm impetuous.
I understand. Yeah.
I have an intent of the heart that is nothing but good. I want to be right. I want to do what's right. I want to do the very best I can. But now there's two types of people in the world. You got some that they're going to be adversarial and they're going to speak the truth, and you just need to accept it and move on. I may sit there a little bit. I won't get too deep into that. But when you go to the other side of it, you've got people that you're on the adversarial side and it's crying out for you to tell the truth, but you say, but I don't want to do or say anything that's going to offend or do something that's going to cause a person to have hard feelings at me, or they're going to be upset with me, or they're just going to cut me off and want me completely out of their lives. That's the two major things that I see. So when you look at this, and this is the way the world, people can listen to this and say what they want to, but it does not matter. What it says is we're individuals. Now, if we're Christians, I always think about J.D. Sumner when he made the statement one time. He said, I knew this man. He said he was contrary, he was stubborn, he was hard-headed, he was everything in the world. But when the Lord got a hold of him, he went down into that altar and he got saved, and he went down a contrary, obstinate individual, and he got saved, and that's the way he went down. And when he come up, he was still a contrary, obstinate individual. So now the point that I'm making, sometimes we have to recognize God just don't work overnight miracles in us unless we're willing to let him. And I'm going to let you respond to that because I know you're going to relate to a little bit of that.
Well, let's just put it in this sense. If we're happy to see people fall, we need to check our heart. And if we're eager to expose things but unwilling to step in to help or intercede, we need to check our spirit. And if we can speak warning and not have any tears, no burden, no humility in it, no desire for repentance, then we should be able to see this and ask the question, are we carrying truth in a wrong tone? And Daniel was troubled with what he was seeing and hearing because he understood what was coming. And that's kind of where it puts us at.
Yeah. And I can't help it. I'm still, as a supervisor, I still have people that gets all over my nerves sometimes. And back in 2011, I'm just going to go ahead and say this now. And if it gets out on the internet and the world picks up on it, I'll just have to apologize for my part of it. But as a Christian, I've tried my best to do what's right. But back in 2011, I had some people, and I had one particular individual. They would walk into my office and they would dump stuff on me and dump stuff all over me in every direction and walk out and leave me to deal with the consequences. And it become so frustrating with this particular one morning that it was either just go ahead and terminate them, do whatever's there or whatever. And thank God, rather than terminating anybody or even making the notion, I did tell them I was probably going to write them up. But I went back, sat down in my office, and the more I thought about it, the more frustrated and aggravated I become. So I sat down there and I wrote a poem, Paul, and I named that poem The Realities of Life. Now, anybody that understands what we live from day to day and how people can get on our nerves, those realities get into our lives in a way that they make us want to tell the world what's going on. So I started it off with saying, I got up this morning, I fixed my cup of coffee, preparing to go off to work. I was happy knowing that there wasn't a thing in the world that had messed my day up. Walked into my office. I was feeling good. I had my coffee, but in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, what are they going to bring into my office today that's going to bring chaos and lay it on my desk? And it wasn't long coming before it happened, and I wound up with it, went through it, talked about how they dumped in there, and they brought every problem they had and dumped them on my desk and expected me to settle it and do it for them. Had nothing to do with work, had to do with everything in the world, but that's what they wanted to do. But they brought it in and dumped it into my job situation and in their life, and there it is. This is the realities of life that we deal with. But at the end of it, when I got it all done, finally got down to that very last part, and I'm going to say this, and I don't know how many people's ever seen it or heard it, but I'm going to say it. But the thing that crossed my mind, and I printed that poem and I printed it out, it said, the one thing that these realities have taught me, that if idiots could fly, this place would be an airport. And I put that in there and I let it rest. Well, now people love that poem. They got into that poem and they loved it. They got to thinking about that airport part and all them people out there and the absence of mind with which they dealt with from day to day. And they said, well, that's a pretty good thing. But you know what happened to me? Within about a week, maybe 2 weeks, I don't know. I can't put the exact time on it, but it seemed like the Spirit of God came back to me, put that poem back in front of me, and had me to read it. And as I read it and got down to that last little line about the idiots and the airport and what was there in the flying version of it, it's like the Spirit kind of highlighted it and spoke to me and said, really? And I thought on that, and I don't know, you've been that way. Spirit of God has a way of getting into our hearts, and He has a way of unsettling us. And the more I looked at that, the more I realized I don't know how you could have been any more judgmental than what you were with that. You didn't just stick to that one person, but you just applied it to everybody in the company. And I looked at that, and God made me change that, Paul. And what He did, instead of having that little word in there, He come back and He said, try this. Patience is a virtue looking for a home. And when that hit. So that's kind of what I'm seeing here. Go ahead. You can take that and do what you want to.
Minutes. So when I was in New Orleans, the first time I had to go to New Orleans for Mardi Gras with SUM Bible Theological College, I didn't know what to expect when I got there. And I always had friends, and I still have friends. I'm not a racist person. I got all kinds of friends, different sizes, shapes, colors, all types. But when I got to New Orleans, I got really overwhelmed. The first night we went on the streets, you went out with a group of people. There was like 400 or 500 students at that time, and we're all hitting the streets on Bourbon Street, and you're broke up into groups of about 50, and you have a partner that's with you. And that first night, I just got so overwhelmed that I remember going and I slid down a wall, sat down on the ground, and I began to cry. And I asked the question, I said, God, did I hear your voice correctly? Is this what you've really called me to do? And we went back to the hotel that night, and I got sick as a dog. I got so sick I couldn't even go out the next night. It was about 2 days, almost 2 days later. And while everybody else was gone, and I was praying in this time, Lord, why am I sick? What happened? What's the deal? And when I finally started praying the right way, I started getting the answers. And my prayer became, God, what have I done wrong? And I can't recall the actual scripture. It was in Acts. I can't remember exactly where it was, but there was a scripture that was highlighted to me in the hotel room that night. And I turned to it, and it was in Acts, and it talked about something of judgment. And I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, what do you mean? What have I judged? Why? I said, I'm not racist. I don't have any problems with anybody. And the Holy Spirit spoke as clear as a bell. He says, you have condemned them before I have. You have judged them to condemnation. You have judged them to hell before I have. So you can't reach, you can't talk to people, you can't love people because all you see is what they're doing, and you've judged them to hell. And I began to weep in the hotel room. I was like, Lord, that is not what I thought I did. But the truth was that as I was on the street and I'm seeing all this stuff, there was frustration and anger that was rising up into me to see the kind of mess that was occurring. And I forgot the compassion. I forgot what I had to have in order to present the truth correctly. And it was after that, I got well, I repented, I got well, went into some great services that they have, because they really do put on everything. You get the full works while you're down there with service wise. You get ministers from all over the place that come and pour into you. You get teaching sessions, and then you go back on the street. And we went back out the next night, or the next day actually, because I missed however many because I was sick. When we went out the next day, the girl that I was originally with, she ended up quitting and leaving altogether, so I had no partner, and they partnered me up with another guy, and it was exactly who I needed, because he had no qualms, no problems talking with people, and he could do it with love and compassion. So God not only showed me what I was doing wrong, he then showed me how to do it right.
Yeah.
And then it was while I was on that street, that's when the spiritual world really opened up. God started showing me things clearly in the spirit realm. Lord, open his eyes so that he can see, and he opens his eyes and he sees the spiritual armies all around. That's the kind of spiritual eye opening I had in New Orleans that day, because I could
And you,
see the spirits above people and the operation
yeah,
that was doing things. And it was freaky. It scared me half to death.
yeah.
But yet,
And
in
you
the
know,
same sense, it just built something inside of me that was like urgency.
yeah. You
So,
know, when you look at that, and in order to speak this, you probably can finish up in a minute with what you were saying. But in the society that we're in today, the people that you were dealing with, we have to remember sometimes that we're in Satan's world. We're living in the world of Satan. This is what was there. This was placed from the Garden of Eden coming forward. But the impact that it has on us, it infects us in ways and causes us to do and say things according to the social and cultural relational areas of our lives and how we've lived, what it's brought into our lives. The people that live today, whether we're in church, whether we're not in church, regardless of what's there, we can tell the truth. Our heart can know the truth and the word of God to a fullness that's unreal. But Paul, when it comes time to apply that, if we're not careful, we will find an adversity will come into it. They will find that a pride will come into it. And we'll find that what we share at this point in time on the issues, that is actually, even though we don't realize it and we don't want it to be, that is actually the intent of the heart with which we're functioning from in this moment. You notice I'm going to try to bring this down into a small place. Where you were, where I am, we get caught up in these circumstances, and that adversarial attitude, when that application is made, and it comes out, it's not going to stay in us. It's not going to stay in that locality, but it's going to move forward. And it's kind of like those four rivers coming out of the Garden of Eden, how they were beginning to spread out into the world. This is kind of what's going to happen. But now this is a spiritual move. We have to recognize even those four rivers were tied to creation and what's there. Every time we do these kind of things, we don't think about it, but we just birth something into this society, into this life, and into our culture. We just made a difference. It may be like a small little pebble falling into the ocean, but we just made a little ripple, and it's coming in. That adversary that's there, and that intent of the heart, and it comes out. We may not have intended it. It'd be kind of like me with the idiots and the flying. It'd be kind of move us into that place to where God said, you know what? There's no place in my world and in my culture today for that. So we look at it. So those issues and the adversarial side of it that comes in, Paul, we have to acknowledge, hey, we may be Christians. We may not be Christians. We may be atheists. We may be agnostics. It doesn't matter what we are, but we will deal with a spirit. It will be the spirit of God, the spirit of man, and the spirit of Satan, and they will be in each and every one of us, whatever our beliefs are, whatever our disbeliefs are, and it will can create us to bring out a place of love and humbleness and humility, or it can move us into a place of judgment, hardness, and harshness, and an adversarial position that we just place that to our family, to our friends, of everybody that's in there. We see that it becomes a part, and Paul, we don't think about it, but it becomes a part of society. It becomes
right.
a part of our culture. Other people feel it. So everything that we do, when we get up in the mornings, we're going to make a difference. We don't think about it. We say, well, I don't have a relationship with God. What difference does it make? I want to tell you something about Nebuchadnezzar. But with Nebuchadnezzar and what's there, God had 10 commandments. Our God had 10 commandments. And out of those commandments, he had two commandments, and they were a part of his character of who and what he is. In Deuteronomy 5, 6, and 21, it has two that's there out of the 10. It says, I am the Lord your God. Have no other gods. Do not make or worship idols, and do not worship other gods. Now, that is a direct statement from God, and it's going to Nebuchadnezzar through Daniel and what's there. The other one is, and this is one that Nebuchadnezzar, I think, really needed to use some. Daniel didn't have what we got today, so he might have missed it. But that second one said, love thy neighbor as thyself. Look at that, recognize it, and use it. Those two commandments, they are the commandment of God. Nebuchadnezzar had the privilege of accepting or rejecting the character of God that would have been there, others didn't. But when we move into a place and we have adversity and it comes out and it's coming out of our mouths, the Bible says from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So when we do that, where you were at and what you were going through, sometimes, I don't know whether you thought about it or not, but where you were at, son, you were down in Satan's country. He's kind of like Washington, D.C., and you were down in it. So that adversarial move, and what does it do? You know what? When Christianity and satanic movement, when they come together in a society, they create sickness, a spiritual sickness, physical sickness. Sometimes it even becomes physical, where you said you were. So when you look at that, going back to where you were now, and you're going to apply that, how would we apply something like that today, going into the lives of every individual, not just Christians, but people that care, that have a heart, and they want to do what's right, but many of them don't know how? How do we reach them?
Well, I kind of go back to what I was saying earlier, that we have to check to see what we're coming out of. What's in our hearts? What's there? Are we coming out of a place of pride? Where are we coming out of? Because that's where the impact comes from, and that's what makes the difference. Because when we speak, we should be speaking with compassion, with a thought process of who people are to God. And if we don't keep that as our forefront and our forethoughts, then you and we're going to get to a place where we're going to speak in the wrong manners. Now, mostly, I would say probably, I think it's a Purifoy trait. We have a tendency to speak the truth regardless of the consequence.
Amen. Sadly.
Sometimes it's a little rough, and sometimes it's hard to chew. And I think our biggest caution for like people like you and I with that carry that kind of a trait, we have to just be aware of how we're saying it. Not the fact that what we're saying is incorrect, but can we say it in a manner of compassion? Are we saying it with a place of saying, you know what, I don't want to see you fall. I want to see you succeed on hearts. We should be saying that.
I agree.
Maybe it sounds rough, and I don't know how else to say this, but I love you enough. I want to see you succeed. This is why I'm telling you this stuff this way, so and so forth. And Daniel, I believe, this is where he's at with Nebuchadnezzar. He's just got the heart of God in him, and he doesn't want to see Nebuchadnezzar fail, but also he sees the judgment that's written on the wall. Yeah. He's going to have to deliver it. The king's asked for the interpretation. Yeah. God's provided the interpretation. And now we're getting to that place where I guess once in the next episodes or so, we'll start in verse 20 and move forward as quick as we possibly can through that.
Yeah. And as we're getting ready, I know you said a while ago, we're getting ready to close this down, but we are adversarial. Let's be honest. Yeah, I think most people are. You get on something that we care about, we'll do that, and we want to tell the truth. And like you said, with that Purifoy trait, sometimes and this is something I feel, many times I wanted to say in my life to tell people when they talk about, you hurt my feelings or you did this or that. And the first thing I want to say, well, get your feelings off your sleeves and it won't hurt you so bad. But then you look on the other side of it and God said, wait a minute, is that what's the intent of your heart is? Or is that a judgment that you're making and you're saying, you know what, if you get your feelings off your sleeves, you wouldn't have that attitude. And first thing that God says to me, do no harm. But we do. Sadly, we do that, Paul, when he talks about doing no harm. And that's what Daniel was doing. He wasn't sacrificing truth. He wasn't sacrificing the fact that it's there. He recognizes and understands what I'm giving you, Nebuchadnezzar, what you do with it may not be what I do with it. It may be somewhat different, but what it's going to do is I will offer you a way that possibly God will do. And it goes back, and I'm going to go back to where the stump and the roots are, where it said, Terry, let's cut that down to the stump, wrap it up, tie it up, put it to the place. We don't want the stump to die. Nebuchadnezzar, we're not going to take you out. We're going to leave you in your position. We're not just going to take you out physically. but we're going to move you into a position to where you can have restoration. I don't know if you ever picked up the redemption plan in this or not, but it's pretty strong.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
says pretty strong, and it's in the world. People say, well, I don't believe in that. Well, you may not, but I'm going to tell you something. And he said, tell the truth regardless. I'm going to tell it regardless. God is God. Jesus is Jesus. Jesus was Jesus in the flesh. Jesus was God in the spirit. Satan is Satan in the spirit. Satan is Lucifer in creation. I'm saying these things to tell you something. Go ahead and dismiss them if you want to, but you do it at your own peril. And I'm being pretty bold saying these things. But what I'm saying is that history has proven to be correct. We are not the one that sets the standard. God is. The character of God is the foundation with which this world was built. The promise that God gave to Abram was, you know what, Abram? In order for you to know and understand, first I'm going to change your name to Abraham, because that's where I intend to pick my chosen people and place them. But he said, you're going to fail, but you're going to be as the stars. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to become Jesus and become flesh in my own creation in order to deliver my redemption plan to you, which is in grace. And there's so much in this we can go back and look at and talk to. But what we've got here with this watcher and this holy one, Enoch could probably give us a little bit of lesson or two in some of this. But what we go back to is the fact that that watcher and holy one said, this is straight out of heaven. This is straight from the mouth of God to your ears. Hear it, understand it, accept it, or reject it. That's your choice. But if you make your choices in this world according to the gods and lords of this world, then this world is where your benefits and where your punishments will be. This is where you will find that your life will be. This is where you will be placed, but you will never find your life in heaven, nor will you be in the holiness and righteousness or the presence of God. That's the choices that we've got. That's kind of hard to make. Daniel did not want to make that, but he said, I have no choice, but I'm going to give you a choice so you can make the right one. And now that's up to you. And I say that to people, whether you see it, whether you like it, whether you hear it, whether you don't. But that's the place that we set today in this world. And what we do with it and how we use it will be determined when God places value on our lives, on what we do or don't do. That is going to be the foundation that we gave God to work from, and that will be determinations that he will make. And people say, well, if it's the will of God, it will be done. Well, I want to tell you something. The will of God will be your acceptance or rejection in your relationship with him, or our rejection of that relationship with him. And what we have in that will tell us who we are in Christ. But the difference between this world and religions is Christ and Christianity. That's where we have a dividing line.
That's all truth that you just spoke. So, well, folks, we didn't get where we were supposed to be, but that's okay. We usually don't. But we will pick up next week, continue on and everything. If you have enjoyed the episode, please like, share, subscribe. You can, we're on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, also on Rumble. You can find us on Facebook, many ways. You can also go to paulpurifoy.com and get information there. So be sure, again, like, share, subscribe. Also, leave us comments. YouTube, there's places for comments for the videos. Leave some comments, things you may want to see, hear, what you think, and everything there. You can also send us messages on Facebook as well at Two Faithful Brews and the Good News. So we want to wish you all the best. And until next time, God bless.